Do you have any openings?
Not anything like planned here, but I'm Darren Carpenter, and this is Samir. And we are two of the three kind of lead organizers for this, and we're brand new at this, so we're still figuring it out. We've got Daria over here who's more experienced at this stuff and helping us out, hopefully, as we run into snags or whatever. And so the plan is today, Ian is going to present on Git, and then I'm going to present something on SSH. And I guess we can save, if everyone's okay with that, we'd save sort of the meetup, what we're doing and what people would like to see. We can save that for afterwards if you want to do the presentation first, or I'm not super particular. If everyone's ready to go, we can just dive right in too.
Well, thanks for setting this up and kicking this back off. There seems like a little demand for it.
Yeah. Samir and I spent several months kind of talking to people and asking about it, and kept running into like, oh yeah, I'd like to, but and we've also heard the stories of rendition after rendition of this in the past, but so there's definitely a demand. And then when we went to Texas Linux Fest, both of us and several people here were there as well, and that was a big conference. And we looked and said, well, gee, if there's this many people just in the Austin area, not that there are people travel from out of town too, but a lot of Austin people there, and there's got to be some demand for this, and so that was part of the impetus for trying to start this up. And so it's been a bit of an adventure, and it's like I said, we're still figuring it out. I just actually started a new job Monday, so I'm like a little overwhelmed, but everyone's good. I guess we'll let Ian take it away.
Okay, so I guess by introduction, I'm Ian Buchanan. I go by this title, Developer Partisan. If people know in the industry what developer evangelism is, that's mostly what I do. It's just that here in Texas, evangelism has a very special meaning. So I joined Atlassian about 4 years ago, and one of the first things that I was charged to do was go around the country and just kind of help people understand Git. And our kind of hope at Atlassian is that if you understand Git better, maybe you'd get over to Bitbucket, but we're happy to put that knowledge out there. But 4 years ago, it was kind of interesting. I was the guy on the left here. Let folks read. Yeah. So, this level of understanding, the kind of copy paste, it like served me well with Subversion and CBS before that, and so, why not forget? Well, once I started to really study how Git worked, when I understood the Git internals a lot better, I really was able to make a lot better use of Git. And it stopped being a mystery to me how it all works. And now I don't know, I feel quite the master of Git. So there is an important book out there. Has anyone read the Pro Git book? Yeah, good. And I would recommend anybody using Git should grab this book because it's free and really has all of the information that you would ever need to know about using Git. Now, one of the things that it does is define Git in this way. Git is fundamentally a content addressable file system with a VCS user interface written on top of it. Does this make it clearer to anyone in here? Yeah, me either. So let me unpack this a bit. I think if we look at some of the ways that it really works, we'll actually come around to making sense of this. All right, so let's do that by I've got some mocked-up commands here, but we'll create a new repository. So we go into some directory, we look at its contents, yep, it's empty. Git init starts everything off for us and puts this .git directory in there. And yep, now we see that's the sole content. Now, has anybody gone into this .git directory and had a look around? Yeah, good, because you're actually meant to. One of the things that you'll see is if you start to look under there are some interesting files. One is the config file. Most people set up Git by, you have to put your username, email address, and your name in. Those configs are global and will go into your user home directory. However, you can override anything that you have configured in global settings as a local config, and it will go into that file inside of the repository. And then that configuration actually travels around with the repository, so that can be quite useful, especially when used in conjunction with the other thing that I'm pointing out here, the hooks directory. Is anybody using hooks now? That's interesting. Could I understand what do you have in your hooks?
There's a couple of test suites that get run on every check-in across certain branches.
Tests on every check-in. That's interesting.
And
locally, right? So that's
locally, yeah. And I've got this one Git hook that takes a screenshot of my face from my webcam every time I commit.
That's why you get the moods over time. That's great. You have
the same kind of same stuff like
the screenshots.
Unit tests and linting. And also before commit message, enforcing the commit message formats, issue number in the commit message, those kind of message.
Okay, so that actually starts. I think those, part of it is that some of these hooks are very useful when you want to make sure that a commit doesn't even hit unless certain things have happened. I think the issue key and some of the other enforcement kinds of things really what makes sense most often, and it's what a lot of enterprises want to do. Of course, that depends on everybody getting the same Git hooks, and that can be kind of tricky, which is why if you come back to the config file, you can tell Git where to get those hooks from, and then you can make sure that those hooks get checked into a directory, and then propagate those hooks to everyone. Otherwise, it's a little bit tricky. Okay, now that was kind of a little random walk around some of the other things, but the one place where I want folks to focus would be on the objects directory, which for a new Git repository like we've just created is empty. So let's create some stuff. We'll have some freshly touched file, and we'll add it to our repository. And right away, what we get is this new file that has a SHA-1 address there. It's actually zlib compressed content of that empty file. It isn't very interesting now because it's an empty file. But zlib compressed is already starting to be kind of interesting, at least in terms of the behavior of Git. So that means on disk, this is quite efficient. So the SHA-1, it is kind of interesting in some enterprises. They just kind of, they've heard SHA-1 isn't secure, but that's not what SHA-1 is being used for, is security. It's just a hash to identify that particular content. The zlib I mentioned. And this brings us to kind of the idea that this is a blob. From the Git perspective, all of the content of that file is just shoved into this blob. Okay, so this gets us to the content addressable part of that Git definition. So let's do the next logical thing, which would be commit our empty file with a first commit message. Now a few other things appear in this directory. All right, so we have the blob that we had before, but we have a couple other things. One is a tree. I'll explain what that is in a moment. And the other is the commit itself. And these all have a relationship to each other. That relationship is going to be understood here. So we have all of these blobs that are the content that we're used to working with. The tree is what maps that content back to the things, the kind of snapshot of content that we're used to working with in a directory view. So it provides the file locations and their names. So now the blobs are changing kind of independently of that file system view of things. And then the commit itself has some interesting information on it. It has a parent, and that actually can be multiple. So in the case of merging, there will be multiple parent commits. It has the author, the committer, and then the reference to the tree. Okay, so but this parent thing and the fact that you start to chain these commits together is what leads to another one of these really profound statements. So Git is just a directed acyclic graph. Also, does that make it anything clear about Git? Some people it actually does, right? So, and kind of interesting that way. All right, so now let's stage some changes. We'll echo some content into our empty file, and then we'll add that content. And now let's look at our object directory. We got an entirely new blob. So, okay, and if that's all of the content of that file, and we already have a file that, or we already have all of the content from the last time we did the add, does anybody see sort of a problem with what's going to happen here? It's just going to grow and grow and grow and grow. But in our day-to-day use of Git, we know that's not what happens. Does anybody know how Git resolves this? Has anybody seen this? Okay, there is an obscure command because you don't actually have to invoke it, git garbage collection, or git GC. It is normally invoked on certain operations automatically, or after a certain number of commits are made, or after a certain period of time. And what happens when git GC kicks in is that it moves the things out of the info directory that we were working with and creates a couple files under the pack directory. These are really kind of all of those objects then again recompressed. So it takes all of the loose objects, turns those into pack files that are delta encoded. So now some of the really good stuff about Git is kicking in. It's only storing the diffs between files, and also zlib compressed. So small again. Okay, so if that's all about the internals, why though? Why does that matter? What does that even mean? First is that we have all of this stuff on disk, under this directory, under this Git objects. So all of these operations that we do, like commits and branching and merging, are local operations, which makes Git incredibly fast. So I think this is kind of hard for people to get their head around if they're still working with Subversion or even worse, maybe ClearCase. That like all of those operations require a network connection. Now you have almost everything done locally, except for like clones and pushes and whatnot. But even for clones and pushes, the efficiency gains with this zlib compression and the delta encoding get us very compact on disk, but also that network operations are highly efficient. So push, for example, is also just sending deltas from the state that it was in. So it doesn't have to send the whole repository state to get things up to date. Also interesting, I think, are that all operations in Git are atomic. So if something has a file lock and won't let a file change, and Git is trying to check out a new version or a new set of files, that lock will prevent Git from doing all of the operations. So you don't get a half checked out state, you are always getting to the correct state. And so the no half completed copies, I think, makes Git a very useful tool in actually an operations environment. So if you're used to doing rsync or SFTP or something like that, the kind of like when the network cuts, you actually may end up with some partially copied over files. Kind of the magic of Git would be that it transfers all of this stuff over and then does its atomic operation of manifesting those files on disk. So that's a kind of added safety there. also then in a production environment, you have this kind of built-in operation for instant rollback, the idea of checkout. So, if that latest version is no good and isn't running, okay, just check out and go back to the prior version. Of course, in a dev context, it means the same thing for us. We can go back to any known state and work from there. So I say distributed, and of course I use Bitbucket as an example, but for any Git hosting solution, it's kind of funny that we've all chosen to use this distributed version control system, and yet our model is to go right back to centralizing it in some kind of hub form. I don't know, is anyone doing any kinds of polls that are not centralized? Nobody's doing email pull requests. Some? Open source?
I mean, just for my personal projects, I have a personal server that I push people to.
Okay.
Instead of,
Yeah. But regardless, the distributed nature of it pretty much means that everybody has a copy. If you were to lose a central hub somewhere, it's not the end of the world. You have all of the copies. You can put them into a new central repo and then start pushing again, or reconcile with each other. In fact, Linux and Git are still worked on in a very distributed way where patches are sent around over emails. It's possible, you can do it. I think there's another aspect of this distributed that gets kind of interesting, is it provides a degree of autonomy to developers or anybody working with that source control, in that everyone can explore the source code. They can make their own local changes without worrying about messing up somebody else. And the impact of that, the blast radius, is always local. So that's pretty powerful. But meanwhile, a lot of controls can be implemented behind server side, whether it's like preventing force pushes so that people can't rebase. Rebasing can often get people into trouble. Or it's making sure that only certain people can push to certain branches. All of those kinds of things can be are effectively managed through the same mechanisms that we do locally, except with pre-commit or pre-push hooks that happen on the server side. So those hooks directory is actually what kind of opens up the power to make sure that the central repositories also implement the kinds of controls that big companies often want to have. All right, so that was kind of just blowing through 15 minutes or so of some of the insights that I've had. I'm going to stop there and just open up for any questions. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
What is your opinion, or maybe you worked in teams before, but when just any of the projects that I've been involved with in the past, we've always just worked with a develop branch and master branch. What's kind of the best practice as far as merging when you're committing quite often and kind of a continuous integration scenario?
Yeah, so there's the great debate in CI, of course, is whether everybody should be working off of master. If you look at some of the experts in the field, they're starting to kind of like, let's break that apart, let's understand that in the world of Git. The overall idea is that you just don't want people working for too long, separate from everybody else. So I don't think that rules out feature branching or very short-lived, kind of like, maybe feature branching is the wrong word, but like class branching. And those should be, I think the rule of thumb is like 2 days or less. And so, that's a pretty short-lived branch. The working on master and develop is just kind of a leveraging Git to help model maybe the sort of environments that you're running in. Some people actually kind of layer on other, like testing and staging if they need those. And then you get into some pretty sophisticated workflows, the kind of now venerable Git flow layers on top of that, feature branching and bug fixing and release branches, and so it can get quite complicated. But I think the key to understanding that is not that there's a best practice for everyone, but that adding every layer of each time you add some kind of layer of branching, you're adding some more complexity. You're adding more work in progress that is kind of not getting checked by getting all integrated together. So it's like the general idea should be to like have as few as possible, but that still maps or models the way that your team needs to work. So it's, in some cases, GitFlow is actually the least complicated thing that could possibly work. But for lots of teams, I don't know, open source projects that I work on, just a master branch and letting people, fork and then push their code in is the simplest thing that I can use in that case. Yeah, and it just all kinds of depends. Web apps are different than libraries, and so each has its own sort of best practice. Yes, I wish there were a single answer.
Just keep it simple, really.
Answer, that's right. Any other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
So on the previous slide, you spoke about controls. So my question is, like, for example, we are pushing some code to the master. We can have some webhooks which basically, like, for every check-in to master, there should be a pull request. The pull request should be reviewed by a couple of developers in my team, and only after they approve it, I can set rules for that, and that can be pushed to master. So my question is that a feature of the controls especially? Is that a feature of Git, or is that a feature provided by the platform that is hosting Git, like Bitbucket?
In a sense, both. Git itself does have the ability to intercept that whole hooks ability is actually available to the server side to be extended. So when it comes to the kind of hosting solution, what it depends on is how can the solution, or how can something like Bitbucket expose that to you without like exposing its own internals where you could go crazy and start to really mess up other people. So to do that, often, for example, for Bitbucket, we have to kind of layer over and provide UI where you check off, from a certain subset of things that you might want to control rather than being able to upload your own scripts. And so, so now that means it kind of depends on which one you use. GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket all kind of take that same approach with we provide some UI, but which controls we give you are different.
Yeah, because I know for a reason that for Bitbucket, that feature is available only in the premium plan.
Yeah. So technically, that's, there's no reason it has to be premium, but from a business perspective, that tends to be the enterprises that value those controls.
And when it comes to Git, right, do you recommend some branching model? For example, you spoke about Git flow. You said it's easy, but then on specific edge cases, it gets really, really hard.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. No, I wasn't saying Git flow was easy. I was sort of venerable in the sense of old. In fact, a lot of the experts these days are saying if you go right to Git flow, that's probably an AFC pattern. It's probably bad to just jump there with all of the complexity that it entails, precisely because there are lots of weird merging cases, easy to go wrong.
And there are like 5 branches. Like on the regular branching model, it's like the master, we have branches after that which we put for master. But in Git flow, I think there are 5 branches, develop or hotfix, it gets very complicated.
Yeah, it is.
And we have certain rules where hotfix needs to be, checked into the release branch and also the feature branch. So it gets complicated.
Yeah, it does. And then what people start to need to do is then they start to lean on their CI system to do branch propagation, like those merge commits. It's just adding complexity that you often don't need. But GitFlow grew up in sort of like the open source world where you kind of wanted to have some control over being very precise about a version goes out, it has been well tested, it's intentionally released, being very intentional about when you're doing hotfixes. But if you compare that to more like a web world where maybe you're doing multiple deploys a day, then in that world, especially if you've got continuous deployment going, where every commit becomes production, getting by with simple master would be the best thing to do. It's the simplest thing that would work. So yeah, I don't have simple answers to that. I think these days most people are like shy of Git flow. The master develop thing is still quite common in many shops. And then I think at Atlassian, we're quite fond of that task branching idea to make sure that every cohesive set of changes gets some kind of code review on it. We're kind of big fans of that code review approach. I don't know. No easy answer to the branching model. All right. Yeah.
So what kind of tools are there available to connect, web app to, Git repo? Or is it something Atlassian does?
There are lots of answers to that question too. Some of them are sort of in a deployment or CI tool kind of area. For example, our Bitbucket cloud offering has sort of a bit of automation that you can run called Bitbucket pipelines, where you basically get to run like script after every commit, and you can use that to push code up. I wrote an example blog post that was actually like using git push to the website, and then you can just kind of point a web server to the code itself. So it doesn't have to be complicated. There's a little bit of configuration that you want to do to be safe. If you expose that .git directory, bad things can happen. So you want to put the right directives in Apache or Nginx to say, never share that .git directory. But other than that, it's like it can be a very, very straightforward thing. I think that example I used was taking a webhook and then would actually pull out of Bitbucket from the web server's side. So it's kind of inverting the control there. I don't know. So there's just so many ways you can do it. I haven't found one that is just so compellingly simple that I can say, do this. So yeah, it's just pick your means of automation. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, like, rebasing can get you into trouble.
Sure.
I'm trying to convince my coworkers to rebase most of the times that they're actually doing merges. I was just wondering if you could expand on like what your preference is, and so it's
Yeah. So don't get me wrong. Actually, without rebasing, Git would be almost boring. And maybe too safe. Like there are just times when rebasing is the right answer. Rewriting history is incredible. But with great power comes great responsibility, and that's okay. So you want to do it on every merge. Actually, that's another kind of tool-aided thing that you can do. I'm pretty sure all of the three big hosting ones have an option that on merge they will automatically squash for you, so that you don't have to have your own team doing the rebasing and then force push. Would that help?
I'm actually, usually doing it locally,
You're
so I guess I
usually
can
doing it
work with that.
And that's okay too. I know actually at the last time I gave this talk, actually not the last time, a couple times ago, somebody came up to me and said he had just discovered he checks out, he works on a branch, and then he kind of discards the branch and just does a commit. It's like kind of an effective rebase, but without actually rebasing. Just does an effective commit of all of the changes that he's made over time. So there's good reason to do that. One of the things that is really helpful for, as you probably know, is that it keeps your Git history much cleaner, right? There's not so many. It doesn't look like Guitar Hero when you're trying to read the history. It's a good thing. It just as you're probably finding that it just takes a bit of time to kind of propagate that comfort level. And so people who are just getting to Git, I wouldn't recommend going right there or like as a team. Take your time. Get used to the Git commands first. So I don't know, how long has your team been using Git?
Before I joined, so I think at least a couple of years.
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, it's time for them to learn something new. Yeah, rebase your branches. At Atlassian, it's actually pretty common for us to do that on some projects, but as a rule, we really like to have that full branch history, and so we kind of leave all that.
One thing to be aware of, if you do that, you will break any signatures on commits. Every single signature will be invalidated for any commits that get rebased. Tags as well.
Yeah, tags. What what else about rebasing? And anybody who has that, that's sort of the trouble of rebasing is that you can get to a state where if somebody's trying to create a commit after a commit that has been rebased, in their copy they have a commit, so their parent is pointing to something legit. But when they push that up, things get a little bit messy because now that commit doesn't exist in the other repo, and it'll complain and strange things happen. So it's why rebasing can be hard. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a dangerous question. I've been doing this a long time, and I started with SCCS,
Yeah.
then went to RCS,
Uh-huh.
and then went into management for many, many years, and now I'm retired, and so I'm playing around with my stuff. And using Git, it's just, to me, was missing one thing, one little thing that SCCS and RCS always did, where anyone with a piece of my code on their computer, if they have a problem, they can't, at least I don't know a way, to call me and say what version they're running.
Yeah, it's all identified by hash, right? Like those up there. So is that the problem in your time?
Yeah,
So, yeah, I guess, the way hashes work, you can usually get by talking about just the last 6 characters there.
right, to me, that don't work.
Oh, okay.
Because I want someone that has the code, that doesn't have Git, doesn't have access to the repository, doesn't know anything about Git. It's got the code, it's either script or source code or whatever, which SCCS and RCS always did. And I did a lot of consulting in Central Texas, and pretty much the problem is, oh, so-and-so's using this version and that version, and then they can merge it together and it goes to a customer. Well, what version does the customer really have? And if you have hundreds or thousands of customers, each one has a little different version. So how do you solve that problem? I've solved it,
Yeah.
but I'm curious how you solve it.
So, I think for Atlassian, we rely a lot on, so we're a big Java shop, and we rely a lot on the fact that there really aren't source distributions of our products.
Yeah.
But there are, the binaries themselves get labeled. So we have a lot of build magic that puts the right version number in that.
On the same lines, just to answer you right,
Yeah.
git log the last 6 or whatever the hex, the hash, that you can, while you are doing your actual binary deliverable as a CI/CD or whatever, similar concept. Just have the, embed that hash, some part of it inside that.
That's what I ended up doing.
Yeah, that's a
Basically,
pretty common practice
I
actually.
just wrote a script that does a wrapper on Git. So it prompts me for what version I want to enter in next
Yeah.
and what the tag is, and then it goes ahead and does that, and then also writes into the file as it's being pushed.
Git describe is another sub-command that you might be interested in.
Which one?
Git describe, space
Oh,
describe.
I'm using that.
Yeah,
Which-
so, yeah, that's
but-
pretty common
But
practice.
then I'm writing it into the file,
Yeah.
right, so.
There's another tool that is also very interesting in this kind of mapping of Git's world of hashes and all that to a version world, which is a tool called Git version that will like bump tags and kind of move things along. I find it pretty useful on open source projects to keep that version number right. You tell it something like, actually there's 2 tools. Another one is a Python tool, bump version. But both of them pretty much you kind of give it you still have to give it the signals of is this a major or minor, a bug fix, but then it'll really kind of manage putting the metadata into Git so that actually other tools can take advantage of it. So that might be something to look into.
Well, I already wrote a script, I was just curious how other people do it. I wrote a script that does the Git describe.
Yeah.
It basically takes all the Git commands out of, I just call it, it's called market. I just enter, it finds all the code that's been modified, goes ahead and puts a label in there, whatever I enter on the text line. I enter the version, it tells me what version's the latest one. Do I want to use that one or increment? I always increment. And then goes ahead and pushes it to the repository. So I don't have it working for Bitbucket, but I use GitLab and GitHub. So pretty much everyone's doing the same thing?
At least we are.
Okay.
Describe and log.
Because it's a problem when you give your code to someone else and go, well, what version are you running? It's like, well, you need to go find this hash. No one has that hash. They have the actual code.
That's where I'd use release branches though. That would be, I'm releasing this code to somebody, this is the release, and that release branch has that, the last commit is whatever is in there. That's the code you release. And then just lock it down. And you already link it back to the master and tag it, but tagging can be problematic, but for the most part, it's okay.
Oh, okay, so that's what I was gonna ask you, because I would, immediately when you said that, I thought tagging, like, that's kind of the, in a sense, it's, just, you know, I don't know, it's pretty lightweight, right? But
Yeah.
what kinds of problems have you?
Well, the rebasing, like you said.
Ah,
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem. So we're very restrictive about changing history because we're for a defense contractor. And the government, so the government audits our stuff. So I can't have any unchecked changes in anything we do, and it has to be very formal.
Yeah.
So because of that, well, it depends for something. And because of that, we can't modify history usually. In some branches, sometimes we use forking models defense. But for the most part, we have the release branch if we're using a branching model, or we'll have a release repo if we're using a forking model.
Yeah.
So that's the configuration management team controls. So it's kind of
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. So I don't know, I guess one last thing, we talked a little bit about rebasing and running into trouble, but has anybody used the ref log to get out of rebasing trouble? Yes. Ah, yeah, good, all right, so, yeah, okay.
Actually, I do have one question about the rebasing. So are you saying use that sparingly, rebase?
Yes, certainly.
So if I'm working on a branch, right, obviously other people are working, also we have a developer branch, so they're checking the code into it. And I want my commit to be played on top of what's in the latest in develop. So is it then the preferred method to cherry pick my commit into a new branch that's, you know, that I branch off from the head of develop?
No, not necessarily. I think replaying onto the
Head.
onto the head is actually quite safe.
Okay.
Where you run into trouble is when somebody already has a copy of the commits that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
If you rebase those and they continue to make changes on those, then the references go crazy. They really aren't pointing to the right things, and you get some merge conflicts that aren't easy to resolve. But yeah, so I'll continue with reflog. Reflog is sort of like not just a history of commits, which are the changes that you're making, but also the history that goes back into changing these guys. So reflog is about the references in these parents. So if you rebase and really mess something up, I have done this by rebasing one branch onto the wrong branch. You can point into the reflog back to the place before you made that rebase, and suddenly those commits that you thought were just rewritten somewhere else are back where they belong, and just never check in that last commit you did. So anyway, there's kind of the pro tip. If you ever run into rebase changes, you'll have to go Googling reflog, but eventually you'll find the commands to get you out of.
Can the garbage collector actually affect your ability to recover something you've done?
That's a good point, because the reflog is garbage collected, and after about 90 days, the history starts to be truncated. So that's definitely there are some settings that you can do to, like if you really need that to last forever, you could make it do that. But yeah, it is really kind of most useful when those changes are recent, and we just need to kind of roll back this. Good point. Lots of questions. Any others?
So for the merge conflicts, right, irrespective of whether I'm using rebase or not, is there any tool that you suggest, or is it all GVim, not GVim, sorry, what is that, Vim 3-way merge? Is that the typical?
Oh, man, no, I can't.
I hate it personally,
I
but.
can't do them. No, what do I use? For the most complicated merges I've ever used, I actually have a tool on here, Kaleidoscope, that I found to be, that gives me the right visual cues that I need to make, like to make the right merge happen. But actually, Git itself, it's like if you have trouble merging, you should go look at the merge. I don't know. Have you looked at different merge strategies that Git has?
Oh, I have, yeah.
Yeah.
Both rebase as well as the standard merge, right?
Right.
And majority of the tools that people are talking, like Atlassian, the Bitbucket or GitLab, the automatic rebase or merge is possible unless it is not, right? I mean, if there is a merge, that's how I think at least.
Yeah.
And that is true too. So you have to have some strategy to, mitigate or avoid that.
That's right.
So just a question,
And there are, and built into Git, there are actually 8 different, like, alternate merge strategies. So like when you automatically merge, if you just say git merge, it picks, like it's picking the strategy that it thinks is best. But there are a few that are like, kind of like you give it, by picking which merge strategy, you're giving it some hints about how it should handle the conflicts. One that we've had to use because of the way Maven prints out that version number, as it turns out. It kind of like injects that into the file, and then you're kind of like forced to take that file and push it back into the repo. So there's a merge strategy there. Well, there are 2, depending on which way you're merging, ours and theirs, that just pretty much tell it, like, just always assume that the one, that is on one branch or the other is the right one, rather than it trying to figure out how to weave the 2 things together. So those are 2. And another one is an Octopus Merge. I've only seen, we actually had a case where we're using that because we were doing a blogging through code, with these static site generators, and we might have like 5 different branches running at once, and we wanted to see the result of all of those branches in a pre-production environment. So we could see all of the outstanding branches like modeled in the blog. Octopus merging would just collapse all of those into one, so it's kind of amazing that I don't know how Git figures it out so well, but it has a lot to do with those hashes and diffing that it can do. What else?
Thanks.
Of course, those are the 3 that I can remember. Questions? All right. So, Darren, I guess you're up next.
Figure out what I should be looking at. Yes. Well, actually, we should start the process right now.
We're gonna do a raffle.
So,
And, we're gonna do a raffle, and we're gonna give away 3 months of Linux Academy. So,
Sweet.
yeah. So apparently you can just enter on your phone, right?
oh, yeah, so. That's you just text that number, and I'll enter you again. And, so you text the phone number and just text messages the 993. 993. Yeah, very good, I covered it. So this is kind of an impromptu thing, but so I've worked like 20 plus years in Linux. Started in IBM in '97. Was kind of fooling around with Linux prior to that. So I've been doing it a long time. Actually, basically saw SSH kind of emerge on the scene, so I used it a lot for a variety of different things. And so my intention was to have a little more of a setup and more of an agenda, but I've gotten what I got. So I guess it's starting to sort of the just some SSH basics. So is anyone not familiar with SSH before I start? I assume everyone's used it. So I've got a big server here that's got some stuff on it, probably enough to build like a big network if I wanted to, but didn't quite have the time to put that together. So let's see. This is why we're supposed to show up at half an hour before we get all this ready to go. So, okay. So here's my hypervisor, and so I've just logged into it. I guess so. What we're looking at here is. CentOS, so it's essentially Red Hat Linux clone. And so I guess the first thing, since everybody's familiar, I guess, with the basics of SSH, of just kind of showing you some basic things that are involved with the SSH server. So this is pretty standard, but it's the SSH. There's a SSHD config and an SSH config file that in the file, there's a whole bunch of options here. Variety of things that you can fiddle with. So this is pretty much stock configuration. Let's see. So notice here it's got a port 22 setting. SSH can actually run on any port you want it to. And one of the things that I've done for a variety of security setups is to change the port number that SSH listens on if you're connected to the internet. Sometimes that's a good thing to do. So I have systems out on the internet that listen on not well-known ports, so I have a number I can connect to, and if you look in the log files for a system that's running port 22 SSH, you'll see a lot of probes, and just by changing it to a non-standard port number, which you could do here, you can also do it through in Red Hat through used to be anyways. So I think you can do that in here. the other thing,
You know which of the two overrides the other file?
what?
Of those two locations of setting up port, which will takes precedent?
So it used to be that you set a port in there, and unless the option may still be supported in there.
I always said SSHD.
Yeah, so I believe that the file would override it, because from what I remember in the past anyways, that file caused the startup script to execute SSH with this explicit option saying, listen on this port. So, a couple different things I'm show you here. One of which is SSH has a debug mode that we can run. So it'll tell you what it's doing rather than just running the background. You'll see here, I started a second SSH server on port 555. So now if I wanted to.
Does it support the syntax where after the IP address you put the colon in the port number?
No, it's probably just this, the option before. No, I know what's wrong.
Is there a firewall up?
Yes. Or you go poke that number in for it. So, doing that. And of course now I'm also getting some debug stuff on my SSH sessions since I ran the server in debug mode. One of the interesting things to know on debug mode is you can see when I log back out, this does it used to, the daemon shut down. That's kind of standard for debug mode. That would be an option. Just for fun, don't know. Looks like the SSH client doesn't like that syntax. But it will work with the ISP option. So that's basic. You can take a port number, set it in your config file for a standard SSH server, or you could actually set up a new service and specify in the service helper for SSH for a second. So you could run a second SSH daemon on a different port number.
But you were saying that the SSH daemon that you set up on 555 shut down when it wasn't in use?
Yeah, and that's because it's in debug mode. So if I, let's see if I can have it. It's in the background itself. If I run it down without debug mode. Now I don't get the debug information when I log in. And want me to log in multiple times. So that's the real basic. What else can we do? Notice here I've got a little SSH server. So now the other thing you can use SSH for is not only can you do regular terminal access, you know, a login prompt or something, but you can also get yourself X Windows supported access by. Sometimes this doesn't work with everything, but we'll try it out and see what it does. So by adding that option, this is assuming that the server is configured to allow it. There's an option in the config file that will disallow this, but by default on CentOS it's allowed. So I should be able to run just drawing a blank. Extern. Got an external there, which isn't very exciting. Let's see.
It's not really exciting.
So it just transfers the display information with the capital X?
Yeah, so a little size. Goes right through there. So, so what this does underneath, if you look at this, if I look at my where I'm, you'll see that the display is automatically set, and the SSH daemon and the client talk to each other and negotiate a port. And then the SSH daemon basically uses that display on the local system as a pass-through. So it'll be on the server side, the X process is talking to display 10.0, and that gets tunneled back through SSH to the client, which then renders the X on the local display. Now there are, let's see if I can get one.
Is there version compatibility, like if you're running external, your source has to be running the same or what?
Yeah, so that's honestly, when you're doing X like this, there's kind of a minefield of this. If you have large disparity in the version of X or that you're using, you're going to run into some issues. In general, it's trying to use, it's passing through all the standard X Windows protocol stuff. So all the X draw instructions are getting passed across the wire that way.
What isn't X supported? Maybe that's easy.
What isn't X supported? Well, so there's two things you're going to run into, and that is that I think there's some deprecation and/or new features that have been added into X here and there, and so sometimes you'll run into and you'll get weird error messages from a graphical application that indicate, somehow or another some native X thing failed. The other thing that you'll see sometimes, and I've seen on a lot of systems, got an older system and a newer system, you run into some conflicts between like versions of GNOME and some of the widget, some of the newer GUI applications will try to send GNOME related stuff through, and it'll blow up on stuff like that. So.
So if the host is running GNOME and I'm running KDE, then there's some common external language between the two, as long as there's not a huge disparity.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of stuff works. I was going to try this because I think this blew up on me before, but no, it's not. So it's not going to fail there, anyways. One of the things you can do if you do run into this, and I don't have an example at the moment, we're going to run into it in a bit. Is rather than putting an X, you can run this capital Y option. It's basically doing the same thing. Let's see here that the -Y option is really related to some X11 security stuff, and I think that's really what kind of gets in the way in some cases, as opposed to the regular X11 forwarding option. So, like I said, I've run into this a number of times, and it's kind of the weird matching between one system and another as to whether or not you run into a problem with that. But so this is a nice, easy option, takes care of a lot of stuff if you're running X. However, if you've ever done this before and you try to do this over a long-haul internet connection, it's awful. Because it's sending all of those draw instructions across the wire. And so on a slower or high latency connection, you'll kind of watch the creep as it draws all the stuff on your screen for you, and it's really, really pretty miserable. So it's a nice option. It works well on a LAN. It works well, in a virtualized environment where everything's really closely coupled. If you're doing it across the internet, maybe if you've got gigabit, it's not too bad. But I've struggled with it, and in fact, I've played with some of this at one point years ago, where I was going across a slow internet connection, and waiting 10, 20 minutes for the screen to draw so I could do something, click, and wait 5 minutes and stuff like this. Really not fun. So one of the things that you can do here, which I kind of have set up. Let's see, how do we do this? I'm going to go here. So this is, I'd love to have this all documented. I don't have time to put together slides and all that either, so. I'm just setting up a new display here. What I'm going to do is run a VNC server. And this is running on the system that I'm logged into. And by default, VNC doesn't, with the firewall turned on, you wouldn't be able to connect to it anyways. I believe the way I've got this set up, I guess I'm not certain if it listens on the network port or not, but it's possible that that will actually be remotely accessible over the firewall turned on. X server by itself is not super helpful, so I'm going to start up an XFCE session on the same display. And then what I'm going to do, add this option here. Okay, so this is a what this does is it says that the port -L is a port forwarding option. -L means that this is going to create a local port 5902 on my client, and it's going to then go through the SSH server, and on the other side it's going to connect to localhost 5902. So I'm just plumbing through it. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and change this just fun so you can see that you can map ports however you want here. They just need to be able to talk to each other. So by doing that, I should be able to. And this is probably going to be too large for the screen. But since I used a local port, 5908, BNC, that's port 8, whereas on the server side I did port 2. As you can see, I've got a password. And so there's my desktop on the other system. So there's actually a lot you can do with the port forwarding. What I've used it for is essentially sort of a poor man's VPN or basic VPN connectivity. Let's see what this is. But this is actually, this routine I used on a bunch of servers when I was at IBM. We actually set up a virtual machine in the core of our build environment. It was in a secured area, and essentially ran a desktop like this for the admin users to be able to, because now even across the internet, since this is VNC will drop frames. It's sending these sparse screen updates as like JPEG compressed images. And so you get a lot better interactivity through a VNC session than you would on Remote X. And by using this SSH tunneling capability, we could actually, and it would be multiple hops in, but we could actually connect to this VNC server inside the secure domain, and then be able to do graphical admin of stuff. We had stuff in our environment that required graphics. And so the same thing with that now, from inside the environment, I could virtual machine that I just started up. So this is yet different than the server that we're looking at right now, and different from the laptop. So there's like now 3 machines chained together here. And actually what I wanted to do is do that. Okay. And let's see if so now this is via VNC on this VNC desktop. But, so you see I have X access, and by virtue of using the VNC display, now within that environment I could do remote X to other systems, have it be fast because it's all in this LAN environment, and on a slow connection, VNC takes care of the slowness. So unless it's really slow, and then VNC is just kind of lagging, you have to wait for the 2 seconds, 5 seconds for it to get the next frame refresh. So that's kind of interesting, but so then the other thing that you can do, but not to get too lost, is now let's do this. So I should be back on. Back to the laptop here. And now I'm going to SSH.
SSH.
Sorry?
SSH.
Yes. Okay. Now I'm going to say local. I'm just going to pick a port, 1, 2, 3, 4. And, so what I'm going to do now is tell it when it connects that that port is the 1, 2, 3, 4 port is going to go to the other system inside this environment's address, 422.
So the outbound ports, 1, 2, 3, 4?
So what that means is on the laptop, there's a port 1, 2, 3, 4 that's listening.
Right.
And when I connect to that, it's going to go through SSH. And then on the remote side that I'm connecting to, it's going to make a connection from that system to this IP address, port 13. So now if you have routing and everything set up, there you can just go directly. So I'm not sure if it actually routed or not. I think it will in this case. And then normally when I'm doing something like this, I'll run something semi-interactive, especially if I'm going over the internet, because SSH will have a tendency to drop after some period of time if there's no activity. So top or the other thing that I like to do is just do something like that. So this will just spit out the date every 5 seconds. And so I'll usually leave something like that running just to keep the connection alive. Sometimes it drops anyways. Now I'm going to say localhost. ISP 1, 2, 3, 4. that I bounce through the other system and directly into this system. And so you can actually use this kind of technique. So in our secured environment, we had systems that basically would both natted traffic, so there's no routing to get to the systems behind it. And they were firewalls. The only way to get into that network was via SSH. And so by going through making these hops, we could actually make a connection that would run between the inside of the network and the outside of the network, even when normal routing doesn't allow that. And again here, this is text only, but by using the same convention I was showing you earlier, you can actually forward stuff like VNC through those connections, or you can also do the X Windows version if that allows.
Are you familiar with proxy jump?
Proxy jump.
It's an option to SSH client. It allows you to do this without setting up the intermediate or forward.
Yeah, there's, I'm not sure if maybe our terminology is different.
I don't know, like it's the option, like you pass it with -O and put it in your SSH config, and you can add it on the
yeah.
And it allows you to treat it like SSH directly to whatever the remote system is through a batch of those.
Yeah. So I haven't used that much. I guess I've normally kept my plumbing explicit, so I know what I'm doing. Because some of my environments where I run this have gotten pretty exotic.
I did the same thing on just, using the config file on my end, because I have hundreds of servers in an environment similar to this, and I don't want to set up a static connection each time, so that really comes in handy if you kind of make a couple of jumps to get somewhere.
So, if there's any more to demo here, shoot up sometime. So my intent kind of long term was to maybe put together some slides and actually set up more of a network environment so I could actually show and describe what I'm doing, and then actually have both NAT servers as well as boundary type servers to go through. But there's, I guess, I don't know if there's one of the other things I can do here. Let's just demonstrate this. Let's see. Oh, so I can also use a remote port. What this is going to do, as opposed to the prior command, is it's going to open a port listening on the remote side of the connection. And you'll see that I'm actually exploiting this tunnel going the other way. Let's see what kind of trouble I can cause here. So now by going through the connection that I've already set up, I can actually So what I've just done here is exploited my already tunnel connection and essentially made a link back that I can use on the remote side. I didn't have like a great thing to more demonstrate here. Essentially what I'm doing is you see that which connection BTS 7. So you'll see that it says that I'm logged into the laptop. That IP address, even though I'm logged in from over here. So if I logged into that same system, this direction, so essentially what I've done is created a channel that goes back to the laptop using that remote port. By utilizing that, then connecting on the remote side to that port 2345, it sends the traffic back to the laptop, and then from the laptop, it sends it out to whatever I specified after the remote port that I specified, in which case it was just the same server. If I had a little more, I could demonstrate this in a way where it would make a little more sense. So again, in this environment that I've worked in, we actually had a NAT environment on the within our lab that protected it from the rest of IBM. We had systems on the IBM network, and I actually had a system set up on the IBM network that would run an SSH connection to my firewall at home. And by utilizing the port forwarding kind of in both directions, it would allow me to create a channel so that I could SSH from home, which I'm also then behind a NAT at home. The firewall is a NAT, but I can SSH from home through this SSH connection and all the way into the NATed environment on the other side. In one single shot, which then would allow me to run my VNC session that I was running in the lab. I could actually bring up a viewer at home. And so I actually, the way I use this is I have a workstation at IBM that I used, and all of the long-running processes that we used in our environment would run in this VNC environment in the lab. And I could be working on that, and I could just disconnect, shut my workstation down, go home, assuming I still have the connection up, the SSH connection to home.
Earlier, where you had this time, just clicking every 5 seconds.
Yeah, to keep it open, and in fact, because of the internet and sometimes stuff drops anyways. And I, probably don't have enough time to demo that as well. Yeah, it's not too hard. I used SSH authorization keys and used that so that I could essentially set up an authorized key pair that would allow me passwordless authentication for that between the specified system and the other side, so that it would automatically reconnect. So if the connection went down, it would try to detect that the connection went down and restart the SSH again. And assuming that everything was in there right, it would reconnect. Sometimes that worked better than others. Sometimes SSH also has a tendency to, if you've got these tunnels in use and you close out your login session. Let's see.
Yeah, have you tried Mosh for that?
Sorry?
Have you tried Mosh for that?
Mosh.
It's a new, relatively new,
Not
mobile, it's like, what is it, mobile shell, you use it.
okay.
What it does is, it makes an SSH connection, runs the Mosh server on the server, and then your client connects to it. And it keeps that session open basically until you close the Mosh session from the client side.
Yeah.
So it's like a resilient SSH session. If you close your laptop and go to a different internet Wi-Fi access point, it'll reconnect.
So to reconnect.
So it's great if you're working from a laptop or a spotty internet connection. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it doesn't require any service running on the server. There's just an executable there that your client runs when it connects. It spawns a kind of a server session and then leaves that running.
So is it its own daemon or is it?
Yeah, so it's a separate software, but you don't have to, like the SSH daemon sits there and runs continually. Whereas this doesn't run waiting for connections until you connect using Mosh on your client. And then it spins up a session and leaves that running until you close it.
How do you spell Mosh?
MOSH.
The Mosh on the client connects to what?
So Mosh uses SSH to start its connection. It connects via SSH to the server, starts the Mosh server daemon, and then disconnects the SSH session and connects over the Mosh protocol, which is a separate thing from SSH.
And so it uses its own port setup or?
Yeah, I think you do have to do some port. I mean, you have to do a port forward for its port too, and I think it has like a range that you have to do. But it doesn't have anything listening all the time.
It's also UDP, so it's not about firewall, but I think it was developed at MIT or somewhere there, so in university environments.
Going back to this window here where I've got the VNC tunnel running. If I log out, you'll notice that it just hangs here. Now, actually, I may have more stuff going through here, so I don't know if it'll work or not. But back up to the VNC, close it, and see a bit. Yeah, so it'll let go. So if you have traffic running through these tunnels, and sometimes you run into GUI applications that for whatever reason don't totally let go of everything, and you'll end up with this kind of hang situation either way. I can also go back here. You just control C the connection, usually that'll kill everything and let go. So since we're running towards the end of the session here, I think I'll just call it a day for this. So if there's any further questions, I like the interactive discussion here.
Just one thing, that very first thing you covered is also very quick to debug. If you're having a SSH problem.
Yes.
You know, you run it on a separate port, the server is still on a separate port, then the client can run both in debug mode or verbose mode, and you'll see exactly what's going on with the server and the client.
Yeah,
Save
yeah.
on maintenance for the clients.
So I've done that in a variety of different contexts. Of course, sometimes you're also debugging network stuff and need to know why port 22 isn't working. And so I've actually gone in and used an alternate port, made a connection over there, and then shut down the regular SSH daemon and run port 22 debug, just so that I could see, hey, what's going on here. The SSH client also has this verbose option, and you can add 1, 2, or 3, and 3 is a lot. And I'll spew out a whole bunch of stuff and tell you about the key exchange and everything else it's trying to do.
Do you ever have to do like a key purge or something like that, like find that it, like for security purposes, or is that irrelevant? Like
a key purge.
Yeah, I mean, so you're creating 2 keys. Does they keep a running log of that, and then since you can connect without passwords?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I mean, how often, or?
So generally for security purposes, you should rotate your keys.
Yeah.
There's software like Vault that'll help you do that.
What did you use?
We, in our environment, we were working on deploying Vault, but we didn't get to the point of having it running in production by the time I left IBM. So in our environment, a lot of stuff has been, and in fact, in general, we weren't using authorization keys much in the environment other than a few places. And then we also had some kind of strange environment stuff that we were coupled to, which kind of further complicated that. So we were, in the cases where we were using keys, other than my personal stuff, which I managed manually, other groups were sharing them, so there were automation processes that shared these keys. And if you didn't do things right, and you rotated a key, you'd end up with 1 or more systems all going bonkers because all of a sudden the keys are no good. But yeah, so that's, and if I had more time, I could show you all the SSH key authorization stuff, but we need to save that for another time or a longer session. Because we're running up on the end of the clock here. So, any other questions? Well, I guess we were kind of hoping to make a little time to kind of discuss what you guys thought about the location, the time, how does this work for you, and then I guess the other kind of question mark we had was what kind of content everybody's interested in, and I guess I could ask, just show of hands, like who's kind of new to Linux here. We've got a few people who are fairly new to Linux, and people are intermediate or middle, and then so we have like long-term Linux professionals here as well. Myself, we've got kind of a distribution to everybody. So we're still kind of discussing exactly what the format should be, how we want to do this. I think for this space and this time, we're probably leaning in the direction of presentations. Assuming we can find people who are willing to present, have interesting things to present. And the scope might be kind of broad, but generally Linux open source oriented stuff is what we're interested in. We've also had discussions about maybe having either specific days, specific meetup times, or maybe even a separate time of the month, having like a show up with your laptop and walk through, you know, a more hands-on, set up your laptop, play with Linux kind of session. We don't have any firm plans for that, but if people are interested, would like to know. And so I guess you can message us through meetup.com.
How does the idea of a survey sound?
I'm sorry?
How does the idea of a survey on some of these topics sound? Survey monkey or something like that?
Yeah, if you want, we'll put together a survey and put it in the discussion area on Meetup. And
Being new, I would be interested in like career advice.
career advice,
Yeah,
okay.
so-
Yeah. So, yeah, I've done that, like one-on-one with a couple of people, just sort of like, what does the lay of the land look like? We also have Daria is a recruiter for Austin Fraser, and so she can tell you about jobs in the area.
I'd be interested in like development stuff, like kernel application space.
Okay. Development, yeah.
That's the question I had, is who's kind of more on the developer side versus like the ops using Linux side? 'Cause for me, I'm just like I like to learn about cool tools to use. I'm an ops guy to make my job easier, but I know a lot of people here are more on like the developer side of things, so maybe a little bit of both, because I'm not opposed to, kind of doing the deeper dive into the kernel and stuff like that, but just kind of, I don't know, just wondering about that, I guess.
I would be very interested in a presentation on network issues or, administration with regard to the network, because I know enough about Linux just to be able to support my development effort, but I'm always tripping myself up over network issues. And if somebody would be interested in pursuing that, I would love to come in and get that.
Okay.
Well, could you post what kind of issues you're in?
There's a whole lot.
Yeah. So, just, can I add this?
Okay, good idea.
Are you running through 5 different systems or just 2?
It just depends on the context. Security, configuration with regard to security, using WebSockets. And stepping up to secure environments with WebSockets. A lot of security stuff. I seem to contribute upon security configuration, especially with
Like the SSHD file, there's certain things by default I go ahead and do set for all my systems.
Yeah.
And then actually I just do it on one and just push them all out.
So, not that I'm going to do presentations all the time, but my background is kind of all of those things. I've done kernel level Linux development, I've done IT administration. I'm currently working at Cray as Cray hired me to be a production build engineer for them. So I'm helping them set up a more automated, easy to use build environment for their really ugly down in the guts of their supercomputers stuff. But so I've seen development, software test, networking. I worked as a CSO for a startup company years ago. So I've kind of been all over the map, which isn't to say that I know everything, but I know a little bit about a lot of stuff. So.
And also the Slack channel, Jeff, I have a question. Someone responds.
Yeah. There's a Slack channel. We basically got all of the assets that came with this meetup. I'm not sure we're totally on top of all of them, but I've at least determined that I can log in and utilize all the admin accounts. So there's still there in operation as far as I know. So I guess since we're pushing 9 o'clock, I don't know, nobody's chasing us out yet, but.
We're going to do our house.
Yeah, should we,
Actually, a quick question. So is this going to be the space or this is the location? So is this room going to be the future space?
So I guess that's kind of up to our hosts here, but in general, the facility is available. And I don't know if we're going to get more or less or what happens next time, but
The reason why I ask is, if the format is to have, say, a presentation in the beginning, that's content, you know, that everyone can find interesting, and then breakout sessions that are more focused to, I guess, operations or development side or new user, because I'm a new user.
Yeah.
My questions are gonna be boring to maybe everyone except 3 people.
Yeah.
And then having kind of directed, to your point, it doesn't have to be a presentation, but, you know, bring your device.
Yeah.
See where you are, the kind of question answer scenarios, or at least a workshop as a part of it. That would be something of interest to me. And then introduction to new tools. From an ops perspective, as people are like, this is what I use in my daily job, this is how I solve this particular problem. Networking is like an excellent one, because I have a Synology NAS and I'm trying to figure out how to access a virtual machine through an SSH client that all I can do is access my local machine. So things like that.
Could you tell everyone what the Slack channel is? I don't remember it, it's on my computer. It's all set up.
TechATX.slack.com.
It's look out.
TechATX.slack.com.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually in the, if you go on meetup.com, there's somewhere in the about thing for the meetup.
It's in the description of the
link
club,
to register.
And if you're new to Linux or Unix, you know, that's a good place just to throw something out. Someone might grab it instead of waiting another month for another session, you know? Throw the questions out there.
There is a Linux channel on the site for Linux questions. How
Yes.
to get an account on Slack.
So, and if you want to get in on Slack, there's a URL that you follow that'll go to an auto register. So you follow that link off the meetup.com page, and it'll take you to a registration page basically, and then that'll put you in. That way we don't have to chase emails back and forth and invite you.
As far as boxes to log into, if everybody doesn't have their own device, we could definitely assist with that. In this academy, we can spin up any flavor you want to log into, play around with. We can create these sandboxes for everyone here for future meetings and
Well, that's excellent.
to play around with.
That's excellent. So if someone does a little workshop, you would probably be able to provide some system for the
Absolutely.
workshop.
Yeah.
That's great.
So while we're doing the raffle, do you mind if I say something real quick?
Oh, please do. You brought the food. Whatever you want to say.
And the swag for the food.
Just show of hands. How many
Thank you for the food.
How many Linux Academy users do we have here? Cool. So for the people who haven't heard of Linux Academy or haven't signed up yet, we're a online learning community, a community of over 111,000 as a matter of fact, and we teach everything from Linux to DevOps to cloud to OpenStack to everything in between, basically. And I just wanted to both fill you in on the news and updates that are going on our side of the house, and also just to let you know, for everybody who doesn't win this free month of Linux Academy Unlimited Access, what you can sign up for and get access to today. So what's free right now on Linux Academy is Ansible Quick Start. And Ansible, by the way, anybody using Ansible? Cool. Yeah, so SSH is the primary kind of connection mechanism that Ansible uses to handle configuration management. So something to practice on. Ansible Quick Start is free. Ansible and Amazon Web Services, using Ansible for configuration management and deployments, a Red Hat certification specialist in Ansible automation. Basically all of our Ansible stuff is free right now. deploy to AWS with Ansible and Terraform, and then Google Cloud Security Essentials, AWS Concepts, Elastic Stack Essentials, Mastering Systemd, SQL Primer, build your own Linux from scratch, that's a popular one, especially for the beginners. LPI Linux Essentials, so that LPI exams, DevOps Pipeline, Learning Activity. We have over 7,000 online learning live labs, so it's another feature that we have where you can go in and basically try to break stuff. It's set up for kind of this mission that you're hoping to solve. You try to solve that mission, and you go through a series of steps to accomplish it. Introduction to Linux Academy, of course, is free. Azure IoT Essentials is free. AWS Backup Strategies is free. DevOps Essentials, Vim, Docker, Puppet, Serverless, Git, OpenStack. So a lot of free content that we have right now. For all those of you who didn't raise their hands and want to join today or as soon as possible. Anybody listen to any Linux podcasts? Cool. So anybody listen to Linux Unplugged, Linux Action News? Cool. So great news. Linux and Jupiter Broadcasting are coming together, and we're going to be providing all those podcasts ad-free, and also we're going to be bringing back User Error for those longtime listeners been listening to User Error, which is a show on Jupiter Broadcast, and bringing a lot of great new content to your ears, and offering a lot of our great content in listening form, which is great. We have a sale going on right now, $299 for the entire year, so that's less than $29 a month, which is pretty cool. And it's for existing members, new members, community members, trial members, everywhere. We have this new thing called Gems for Swag, which is pretty cool. So you use Linux Academy, you collect these gems, which you can use to purchase things which I gave away for free today, but things like the Pinehead plush things. We have mugs. We have Yeti stuff, which is pretty cool. We have lots of stickers, lots of actually learning activities that you can unlock using gems if you're a free user and you want to unlock some of the additional content that we have. So that's pretty cool. And then we launched over 200 pieces of content in August. Before that, we released over 75. So we're at kind of a record content launch right now, and we plan to do another big launch in November. So that's it for my kind of pitch on Linux Academy. So let's go ahead and
That's great. That's great information.
If you lock in the sale price now, this is important. Linux Academy is $150 off. And you would think, oh, I buy a year, but next year, no. If you lock in the price now, we will not raise the price when you do it.
Yeah.
Forever. That's what I'm told by the big boss. Forever, ever, ever.
And when we look at the competitors, Cloud Guru is what, $800 or something per year?
Yeah, but we'll let you spin up servers in the cloud, or servers in the cloud, create your own scenarios, your own labs, and when you come into the site and you have a problem, Chad answers your problem.
Yeah, we have the most full-time training architects, such as myself, more than any other training provider. So that's one of the greatest features.
Who last chance? Okay. Everyone's phones are going to go off. I heard somebody.
Hey! I was worried it was work paging right
Cool, congratulations. I'll just get with you and we'll exchange info and get that going for you. Thanks.
question, are you guys based here then, or Dallas, or what's that here?
We're in Keller, which is outside of Dallas.
Oh, okay.
Outside of Fort Worth, actually.
Cool, okay, nice.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.